So today, this is an event, the first of a series of events that we are planning until the European Parliament elections of June. History accelerates. The last European Parliament elections were 5 years ago in 2019, and it feels like a long, long time ago. Early 2022, Russia attacks Ukraine, which was an attack against Europe, the Western civilization, an attack of huge barbarism, cruelty, that caused a lot of suffering, and I would say it caused a shock. Europe has seen the rise of far-right parties. They will vote against the support of Ukraine. They will vote against all innovation, against the plans for green and digital transition. They will vote in all possible reactionary ways to keep Europe back. Our task is for the next months, first of all, we all have to make sure to vote for those elections. We need to switch to the next stage of becoming the United States of Europe.
So one of the things I'm doing is I'm campaigning for the confiscation of Russian frozen assets. One thing I want to mention about that, because I know out of experience that not all of the people are informed about that, and I feel like it's really important to understand that the main country who holds these frozen assets is actually Belgium. But the key message I want to point out today is the whole situation which is building up right now for Ukraine with the upcoming elections in the European Parliament and the changes that they are going to bring to the relationships between Europe and Ukraine. For me, it's important to talk now about what are other options to support Ukraine, not only on the political level, not only talking about the political relationships between our governments, but just on the level of citizens. Partnerships on the business level are so crucially important, and that's a way for Europeans that can help us so much and so radically change the whole game. It's not necessarily can be one-sided support. Ukrainians has a lot to offer, and I feel like the whole integration process and the whole relationships are going to be so much more empowered once it's going to be more double-sided.
My job is to think about geopolitics and strategy, so I'll just comment in this way. We are not moving to World War III, I don't believe that, but we are definitely in Cold War 2.0, if I can put it this way. That's what we're facing today. In this context, today, the West, Europe, the United States, Canada, and Ukraine versus Russia are engaged in a war of attrition. The party that will win this conflict will be the party that can sustain attrition. This war of attrition, I think European strategy is based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is aid to Ukraine. Second pillar is to weaken Russia economically through sanctions. And the third pillar is to weaken Russia politically through international isolation. Russia is not isolated internationally. Russia has a strong partnership with China. It can leverage its networks through the BRICS. So here our strategy of international isolation has failed. The aid that the West provides to Ukraine is not sufficient. And actually it's decreasing. And I'm not only talking about the economic support, more critically also about the military aid. It has decreased with 90%, 9-0, compared to 2022. Whether we are going to be victorious in the war of attrition or whether we're going to move to something else that is not good for Ukraine, I think our time frame here is 1 year. But unfortunately, I think the constellation of cards is not in favor in the coming months. We see that in the European elections, extreme right-wing parties, extreme left-wing parties will probably gain a significant amount of seats in the European Parliament. The kind of parties that are now being popular are not necessarily friendly to Ukraine. They are not interested in being victorious in a war of attrition. These kind of parties are rather interested in reaching some sort of deal to freeze the situation.
The political landscape, certainly the way we're covering it in the European Union, has changed a lot in the last couple of years. Domestic issues now much more in focus, and I see that in the kind of coverage that we're being asked to provide. It is very much about the farmers' protests. It is very much about the sluggish economy. It is very much about migration as a huge issue, certainly separate to the invasion of Ukraine, but there are these domestic feelings, very, very strong discontent across the European Union. I wanted to just touch a little bit on the things that we've spoken about when it comes to the looming European elections and the fact that the far right is set to have, or far right parties combined are set to have their best election ever. They are not necessarily, these parties, at least we've seen in our reporting, a monolith when it comes to Ukraine. They are not pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian, stop helping Ukraine. That's not the case. Or there are conversations that can be had, irrespective of where there may be disagreement on other issues, particularly on federal Europe. I'm sure you'll have some fairly stringent disagreements with a lot of these parties. Of course, the invasion of Ukraine was a crisis of unparalleled measure, certainly in Europe, but it also has seen a reaction from European countries and from the NATO alliance that we haven't seen for a very, very long time, particularly when it comes to dependence on Russian fossil fuels and the NATO alliance finding its purpose, finding its feet, adding new members. There's a lot to see there as well. When the invasion started, it was a really remarkable explosion of a new social media platform that had exploded during the COVID pandemic in TikTok. And these individual social media platforms had very different approaches to tackling disinformation. Anything that elicits a very, very strong emotional reaction, I would immediately urge you to be suspicious of. There is also a desire to represent European societies as these failing, crumbling, aging democracies where nothing ever gets done, and it is easy sometimes in Brussels to feel like the process is slow. My point is broadly that there is still things to be hopeful of, so long as we stay focused and reach out wherever we can.
We're actually going into a period of European history where we're feeling pulled by the inertia of forces that call us to live a historical mission. And I believe that this historical mission has a lot to do with the European integration process. We have actually opened accession negotiations with Ukraine, with the Republic of Moldova, and also with Georgia. We're heading for a new stage in European history. So, looking at the 2024 elections, the reason why they matter so much from the European Union perspective is that we are about to choose the majority or the people who will be around at the time of future discussions on a treaty revision, very likely. There is a strong, let's say, trend that no one so far on the panel, although everyone has referred to it, no one has quite called it. I think it's a sovereignist, it's a national sovereignist trend. It's these political parties that have an understanding of sovereignty that looks back to the nation state. When we look at the geopolitical landscape and we see the dynamics of the bigger countries around the world, no single EU member state is going to make it on its own. The only thing we have as an option for us to continue to be leaders in the world is a notion of European sovereignty that is joint. And so I was extremely worried that what is at stake is not just our potential to create, let's say, an entity for promoting a peace model around the world, a peace model that is competitive, that has an economic added value proposition to it, but it's also just our very own ability to carry forward, to actually develop an economy that is predictable seems to be at risk. So I do think these 2024 elections will be critical in Europe. And so I've decided to try to become a candidate myself in them.